Hi everyone, I'd really appreciate if you went and followed my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/stevis5. I'd also really appreciate if you subscribed to my YouTube channel. Enjoy the video. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about Game 3 of the World Chess Championship in 2021 between Magnus Carlsen, the reigning world champion, and Jan Nepomniachtchi, his challenger. Now, Nepomniachtchi got the white pieces in Game 3, as he also got the white pieces in Game 1, and the colors alternate. So he'll have the white pieces in all odd-numbered games for the rest of the 14-game match. And you'll see that for a while, it looked like this game was pretty much repeating Game 1. So if you watched the Game 1 analysis, you would know that Nepomniachtchi chose e4 in Game 1 as well. And in Game 1 as well, we got a Roy Lopez. Carlsen played a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles. So far, all following Game 1. And here was the difference. So in this game, Nepomniachtchi decided to play a4. And in Game 1, he played the move h3. And if you remember, here Carlsen played a very unexpected move, knight a5. And the game continued, knight takes e5, knight takes b3, a takes b3, bishop b7, d3, d5, take, queen f3, bishop d6, king f1, rook fb8, queen takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop d2, c5, knight f3, rook d8, knight c3, and the game continued, eventually ending in a draw. Since this opening is shaping up to be a key part of this match, and it seems like it's very possible that in more of the games where Nepomniachtchi is white, we will see this exact same position once again. I wanted to mention that another move here that Nepomniachtchi could try later on in the match is the move c3. And Nepomniachtchi's never played this in his career, but Carlsen has had many games on the black side of this position, and I included one where he faced Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and got this position with black. So, that being said, Nepomniachtchi played a4 in the game, bishop b7 was played, and Carlsen has also tried b4 more commonly in this position. I attached a game where he played against Sergei Karyakin, which eventually ended in a draw. And in this game, he played bishop b7. Nepomniachtchi played d3. Carlsen played d6. And here, Nepomniachtchi played knight bd2, the first slight deviation from the norm. Here, knight c3 is the most common move. And it hasn't been played as much at the highest level lately, but in master games in general, it is most popular. So I found a lot of games when looking at this line that were from like the 1990s, but like some old Anand games and players like that. Nigel Short, Michael Adams, players who are a little older. But I did find a more recent game between Jan-Christoph Duda, who won with the white pieces against Evgeny Nair. And these were the moves that were played. I'm just going to go through it very quickly. So, knight bd2 was played in the game. Rook e8 was played by Carlsen. And here, knight a5 was more popular, and this variation is actually very commonly played by the player Evgeny Tomaszewski. With the black pieces, he likes to play this variation where he grabs a pawn on a4. And I found a ton of games in the database where Tomaszewski played this line, and Tomaszewski is probably someone that a lot of people wouldn't have heard of, but a little while ago, like a few years ago, he was sort of upper 2700, so he was someone who was playing at a lot of the top events. And he has a lot of games in this line against top players. I attached a game against Geary, but I also found games where he played against players like Caruana, for example, and a bunch of other top players. I don't really remember exactly who. But he did lose this game to Geary. So anyway, Carlsen chose rook e8, knight f1. And you'll notice with this analysis in general, I'm going to focus on the opening because I think the opening was really the interesting part of the game. So sorry if I'm going too deep into all of these opening lines, but I think that this is where the most instructive, where it's possible to get the most instruction out of. So knight f1 was played in the game. c3 is also possible. And I found a game between Fiddler and Adams that was a quick draw in this line. In this position, they agreed on a draw. It is roughly equal because after d5, these pawns are all locked down. So knight f1, h6. And the funny thing looking in the database here is that both Carlsen and Nepomniachtchi hadn't played this position with the colors that they have in the game, but Carlsen actually had a game where he was white, and he had this exact position, which is a sign that Nepomniachtchi was probably doing the right thing if he was following a Carlsen game. And Carlsen had this position in an exhibition game. I'm not sure how good his opponent was, although probably a weaker amateur player. And the game continued knight d4, takes, knight g3, h6, knight f5, c5, queen f3, and Carlsen just got a winning position. Already, queen g3 is coming, and there's a large attack. So, h6 was played in the game. Not knight d4, and bishop d2. And one thing I noticed looking here is that I found a game between a Russian and a Norwegian, and the Norwegian is Torbjorn Ringdoll Hansen, who, again, probably someone that not a lot of people have heard of, but he is actually Carlsen's first ever chess coach, when Carlsen was probably like 9 years old. And I think also the timeline would match up so that Hansen was coaching Carlsen when Hansen played this game. I don't think it's very likely that Hansen showed Carlsen this game, but it's interesting nonetheless. And the game continued as follows. And it is possible that Hansen has even been working with Carlsen more recently. I wouldn't be surprised. I know that a lot of the Norwegians work with each other. So just an interesting thing to point out. I'm not sure that it's relevant, though. So bishop f8 was played here. Knight e3, knight e7. Some slow maneuvering happening here, because knight e3 is trying to plant the knight on f5, and knight e7 prevents that. And c4 was played here. And this is kind of a counterintuitive move, but it is a very interesting idea, one that I've actually had in some of my over-the-board games, because a lot of times black's a6, b5 structure can be kind of annoying and very solid and sort of hard to break down. And playing a4 and c4 does that. And this looks counterintuitive because this bishop on b3 suddenly for a move has nowhere to go. It's stuck behind its own pawns. But the thing is, that's very temporary because black has to do something about this. At the moment, their b5 pawn is hanging. They can't play b4 because then just bishop takes b4. So they have to resolve this somehow, which is going to give white the chance to get this bishop back out eventually. And in the game, takes was played. Okay, for now the bishop is still stuck behind the knight, but the knight will move at some point and the bishop will get back this nice diagonal. And here Carlsen played the move knight c6. And I think this is a very interesting moment. And probably a moment that shows that Carlsen may have still been in his preparation here. Or if he wasn't, then, well, Carlsen's just a very good chess player, which we know anyway. I mean, he's the world champion. So it doesn't really come as a surprise to anyone that he played a very good move. But knight c6 does look kind of weird, because you went knight b8 to c6 to e7 back to c6. Knight c6 is a counterintuitive move, and what it does is, for one, it takes further control over the a5 square, which is kind of important. Now that the knight is on c4, a knight a5 jump is something that could easily happen, and so knight c6 sort of prevents that. It also takes further control over the d4 square. So this is a good move, but not one that is very human, I would say. And there was a game here that I found. I think this is where knight c6 is a novelty, so this is where there are no longer any master games left in this position. But in this position, there is one. And this is kind of an instructive thing to look at, even if it's not necessarily super high level, even though, as I said, it was a master game. Sorry, let me just charge my computer here. Just a second. Okay, so, right, I was saying that this is an instructive game, even if it's not the highest level, though it is still a master game. This is a game between two female players, and here, this is actually an idea that came up while the game was being analyzed. The female player with the black pieces, I believe a strong Turkish player, played the move rook b8, and here the player with the white pieces played knight c takes e5, and this gives up a piece. But the problem for black is that suddenly f7 is under attack and it can't really be easily defended. So after take in the game, here king h7 was played, but after bishop takes f7, white ended up winning pretty quickly. The rook is trapped. White's just going to win a bunch of material. And also have a nice attack, too. This king is sort of misplaced on h7. So that is something to watch out for, which shows that this position is dangerous. And that's another thing that knight c6 does. It prevents that from happening. So here, Nepomniachtchi played rook c1. And I think that another candidate move possibly here is the move knight a5, and you'll see sort of why I think that is a good move on the next turn, because at least from a human perspective, this feels very natural, right? You're putting your knight on a square where it attacks the bishop, and after a trade, then you get the bishop on a5, which feels pretty good because it's attacking c7, which is the base of this sort of mini pawn chain here. And you're just putting pressure. You can put pieces on the c file, possibly, to really put all of the pressure on this pawn. So this was the idea that I thought might happen in the game. And here if black plays a move like d5, well, you can always play rook c1 now, hit the pawn, and you sort of got the move that you wanted in the first place anyway, without allowing what Carlsen played in the game, which is a5. And this is a strong move, and I think probably one of Nepomniachtchi's ideas was, okay, I'll just go rook c1 and then I'll go knight a5, but Carlsen stopped that with his move a5. And this is a very strong move. This is the best move according to the computer by far. again, just stopping knight a5, which is a little counterintuitive, because as a lot of the commentators were pointing out at this point, the a5 pawn is very weak. It's attacked twice by white's pieces, and black's pieces are kind of paralyzed in defending it. At some point, Nepomniachtchi might just go bishop c3 and queen d2. And in fact, he did play the move bishop c3 here with that idea in mind. But it is still a very strong move, and probably one that helped Carlsen a lot in this game. And yeah, again, if you play a move like rook b8 here, then knight a5 is key, and after takes, suddenly this pawn's awkward to defend, actually, because rook c8 would blunder into a nice little tactic. Bishop takes f7, king takes f7, queen b3 check, which attacks the king and bishop at the same time. So here you would actually have to play rook e7, and now after knight h4, white is doing quite well, because the knight's jumping to f5, and you can't stop that by playing g6, because there's knight takes g6, taking advantage of this pin. So this could be very annoying, and that's why it's really important to play this move a5. So here bishop c3 was played, again, setting up this idea to go queen d2. Also could be supporting d4 in the future. And here one other idea suggested by Fabiano Caruana, one of the commentators, was the move knight to e3. And it's kind of funny because both sides would have then moved their knights back and forth, since Carlsen moved from c6 to e7 back to c6, and Nepomniachtchi would have moved e3 to c4 back to e3. But this move makes a lot of sense. It could prepare a knight jump into d5 or f5, and the bishop is a piece that you might rather have on the c4 square, because now you have ideas to go bishop c4 to b5, which could be annoying. But Nepomniachtchi played c3 in the game, and here bishop to c8 was played, and this is another really good move from Carlsen. And possibly Carlsen was still in his preparation here. I'm not sure that he looked at this position specifically, but playing this idea definitely shows that he clearly had a very good understanding of the position, because bishop to c8 doesn't really look right. I don't think it's an easy move to see, but the point is that now you want to put the bishop on e6, and on e6 this bishop is very strong because it just prepares this d5 move, which just sort of frees black's position. And in a lot of these types of positions, if black gets in d5, then black is potentially even better, because then your pieces are staring down at this weak d3 pawn, which is backwards. There's no c pawn to guard it anymore, since Nepomniachtchi played c4 earlier on. And here Nepomniachtchi could have continued with his idea to play queen d2, or at least that seemed like his idea on the previous move. But here Carlsen can play bishop e6, and now there's sort of some tactical problems with grabbing this pawn. If you take on a5, then Carlsen's in time to trade bishops and then take a4. And so you just trade pawns, so white doesn't really get anything out of this. Similarly, I should, I guess, also mention you can't take on a5, because then black takes on c4 and then takes on a5. So there are some problems there, and so Nepomniachtchi just decided to go d4. Sorry. He played d4. Just striking in the center immediately, trying to make use of all of his pieces, all of his development, and again, just get rid of his backwards d-pawn. So after e takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes, queen takes, here bishop to e6 was played. Again, Carlsen just continues with his plan. And here Nepomniachtchi spent 30 minutes, which is not only the longest think of the game, Nepomniachtchi's longest think, but this is the longest think of the entire match. Which is kind of surprising considering Nepomniachtchi has played very quickly throughout the match in general. But here he had a lot of moves to consider. And despite spending so much time, I don't think he necessarily made the right decision, although I don't think it was so easy to understand what the best move is here. It's a position that requires a lot of precision. The first move, I think, to consider, maybe the most natural move, is rook c to d1. You're just bringing your rook to this file where it stares down black's queen, potentially stops d5, but the problem is that this doesn't stop d5. Black can play d5 anyway, and there's just nothing you can really do. You sort of have to take this pawn. After d5 here, e takes d5, and queen takes d5, and black would just want to trade queens here. Because if black gets the queen trade, then they're doing just fine. They can take back with the knight, and really there's just nothing for either side. And so here maybe white would play a move like queen f4, attacking this queen, and then possibly black could just sidestep that with a move like queen h5, and black has some activity here. White could take on f6, but I'm not sure that that matters too much. Then black has the g7 square for the bishop, so white wins a pawn, but at some cost. Let's go. Yeah, let's go. Okay. So yeah. So another move that could have been played here in this position by Nepomniachtchi is the move bishop to c2. And it kind of lines up with this diagonal. Like, some of you guys might notice that bishop c2 has sort of a sneaky idea to maybe go queen d3 and e5 at some moment and go for a checkmate on h7. So this is kind of an annoying move, but and like after a move like c6 here, then queen d3 actually makes the threat to take on f6 and go e5 and go for this checkmate. So this is very possible. Does taking on c7 lose the bishop on b3? Let's see, where is that? I'm trying to see, where would you take on c7? Let me know what line that's in. In the queen f4 line. Ah, okay. Here. Oh, yeah. So if you take on c7, then there would just be rook c8, maybe. And then you could go back. I mean, I think you could get away with taking this pawn, probably. But I think maybe the problem is that black has some activity here. I don't know that there's, like, a specific problem with this right away, but you know, black has moves like bishop d5 coming, taking this diagonal. You can put a rook on the c file, like rook a c8 makes a lot of sense here, putting pressure. So yeah. Yeah, so like you might get something like rook c8, then white would have to go back to f4, because, I mean, you can play queen a5 and then rook c5 maybe. This looks very complicated, but, like, probably you would want to go queen f4 and try to defend this, and then black can go knight d5 and attack the queen. And if you play a move like queen g3, then black just takes, and there's problems here. So you have to stay defending this, so you have to play a move like queen d4 or something like that. But then like take and bishop c5 could be annoying. So yeah, basically black just has a lot of play here. Yeah, bishop d5 would be a blunder. Let's see, where is that? In this position? Yeah, bishop d5, I guess bishop takes f6 is annoying. I don't think it necessarily, like, blunders material. I mean, it doesn't blunder material, but I guess it could be annoying. Oh, and there's also knight b6, I guess, with this attack. So, yeah, maybe bishop d5 is a little imprecise. But this is an idea at some point. Okay, so let's see. So where was I? Yeah, I was looking at this line quickly. So like c6, queen d3 could be very annoying with some threats here. But the problem with bishop c2 is the move d5 once again. And if you take d5, I mean, you don't have a lot of options here, so taking on d5 makes sense. Then just queen takes d5. And again, you don't really want to trade queens because then black gets to take back with the knight and they're just doing fine, basically. And, well, you don't actually really have much of a choice here because you can't go queen f4 here because the knight is hanging. So you don't have much of a choice. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, let's see. So, one other move. Well, yeah, I guess I'll just get to the move that I think is best here. And the move that I think is the best move by far, and the move that might have given Nepomniachtchi chances to win this game, is the move queen d3. And I think this is certainly not an easy move to see. It's very deep. But again, there is an idea to go bishop c2 and create threats on this diagonal. And the other idea is that this is pretty much the only move that prevents d5, or at least discourages it, because now if you play d5, there's bishop takes f6, and queen takes f6, e takes d5, and you win a pawn. So this would have been very tricky. Bye, Mimi. Yeah. Yeah, I hope you tune into the stream another time. See you. Okay. E takes d5. So, also one thing I should mention is you could try queen d2, and it looks like this does the same thing, but there's sort of a subtlety here that makes the difference, because now if d5, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, e takes d5, the problem is the bishop jumps to b4, and there's a skewer here. So this actually doesn't work. So, that being said, Nepomniachtchi played none of those moves. He played the move h3 here. And h3 feels like kind of just a waiting move. And maybe this is a position where you can afford to play a waiting move, but this does allow Carlsen to use his opportunity to play d5 here. And I think that was the best move. He played c6 in the game, which a lot of people were critical of, and we'll kind of see why c6 was imprecise later on. But if he had played d5 right away, then this forces a trade, and here, you know, white can play a move like queen f4, but again, black seems to have some compensation. There's like rook a to b8 using this b file. We might have gotten a line like this, and here you might think that white can grab a pawn with bishop takes a5, but now black has the move knight f4. And suddenly white is in some trouble. They can survive this, but black has dual threats of knight to d3, forking these rooks, and also just bishop takes c4, followed by rook takes a5. Now that's a lesser threat because you can go bishop takes c4, then you can just take on e8 and remove the threat of a5, taking on a5, but this can be an idea at some point. And basically black has enough play here. There's also a knight e2 check in the air. If you move your rook to d1, then this is the problem. So Carlsen didn't play d5 though, and he played c6, which was a little inaccurate. And I think if Carlsen had any chance of winning this game himself, it was probably to play that move d5. And you guys can kind of see why I feel like the opening is super important in this game, because it just feels like a lot of the critical parts of the position are sort of unfolding in the opening, and you'll see also that later in the game things aren't nearly as interesting. Like, sort of with this move c6, this cost Carlsen a lot. Earlier on I said that h3 kind of cost Nepomniachtchi. If he had played queen d3, it could have changed the game entirely. So you see that a lot of these points in the game are very important. And that is the nature of a world championship match, because both these players are really good, so one inaccuracy can have a large effect. So bishop c2 was played here, and this is a good move, because Nepomniachtchi keeps chances alive to maybe go queen d3 at some point, and now if Carlsen plays d5, Nepomniachtchi doesn't actually have to take on e5, take on d5, he can play the move e5. And now, after d takes c4, there's queen takes d8, and then e takes f6. Also, if you play the move c5 here, then white can go queen d3, and now suddenly you're in big trouble, because there's this mating threat in the air, so you can't really just move this knight away, because you get checkmated. And that's the difference after bishop c2. That's why this move is so important. Well, also, I mean, the other reason, I suppose, is you wouldn't want to go d takes c4 and then e takes f6 and then lose b3. That's another reason why this move is important. So, Carlsen might have looked at something like e takes d5, queen takes d5, and just trading queens, and now again black is just perfectly fine. So he probably overlooked e5, or maybe at least underestimated it, I don't know. But d takes c4 was played, and we got a trade, and at this point, pretty much things are just petering out to a draw, because here black played just another precise move to sort of finish things off, which is bishop to b4, and you're just trying to trade off white's bishop, which is very strong here, particularly on this diagonal, and now we got a trade, and this is pretty much just equal. King f1 was played, and here if black tries to activate with rook d2, then white can go rook e2, and white sort of wants to trade rooks here. If we get a rook trade, I mean, first of all, the active king is used here to hit the rook. But like if we get some rook trades here, I don't know, let's say take, and let's just put this on the board randomly. It does hang a bishop, but if we did get this trade, then suddenly white actually has some chances to sort of bring their king in, try to target these pawns, and also to go f4 and g4 and expand on the king side, where they have a 3 versus 2, right? They have 3 pawns and black has 2, whereas here black also has a 3 versus 2 on the queen side, but because they have doubled pawns, they can't really use this 3 versus 2, which I think is very instructive. So that's why white is the only one that can win this position. But Carlsen did not try to trade rooks. He played rook a to b8 and rook to b1 here. And here Carlsen played a very nice move, which is king f6, because he realizes that Nepomniachtchi wants to get into the bishop endgame for the reasons I talked about. Like, he can target these pawns and go f4 g4 and try to create a passed pawn of his own, but Carlsen uses this tempo to bring his king one step closer to the center. So now when we get this bishop endgame, his king gets to the center immediately, and now it's really a lot harder for Nepomniachtchi to do everything he wanted to. And he played king e2 here, And now this is sort of the final key point in the game. Carlsen played one more precise move, which is f5. And now you're never really going to get in the moves you want, like f4 and g4. And Carlsen really shut that down on his next move with f4, because now if g4, then just en passant, and an h3 hangs. So there's really just nothing you can do here, and the players just agreed on a draw.